Welcome to Cortado Joe, where age reversal, AI biology, and longevity politics get very weird. A scientist goes on Joe Rogan and calmly talks about rebooting old cells, making drug discovery absurdly faster with AI, and maybe one day making it impossible to guess anybody's age. Which is thrilling, a little terrifying, and also the kind of thing that makes you stare at your moisturizer like it personally failed you. David Sinclair's big idea is that aging, underneath all the wrinkles and breakdowns, comes from cells losing their identity. His lab's OSK gene therapy is basically trying to reinstall the software so an old cell remembers how to act young again without wiping it all the way back into a stem cell. That's why the first human trial is happening in the eye, for glaucoma and sudden vision loss. The eye is contained, easier to monitor, and a lot less scary than spraying this stuff around the whole body on day one. In mice, versions of this have reportedly restored vision, repaired nerves, helped joints and bone, and even reversed some signs of cognitive aging. That is obviously the part everybody texts to a friend, but the giant asterisk is that mouse miracles do not equal human proof. The main fear here is simple. If you push cells too far back toward youth, you could end up with dysplasia or cancer. Sinclair says they leave out one of the 4 Yamanaka factors on purpose, so the cells move toward a younger identity without becoming blank slates. He also says long-term animal work didn't show more tumors, which is encouraging, but still not a free pass. And honestly, I appreciate that he doesn't pretend sick patients wanting access means you just throw regulation out the window. If the ambition is eventually whole-body rejuvenation, the standard cannot be vibes. Then the story takes a hard turn into sci-fi speedrun territory. Sinclair says AI compressed a drug discovery task that might have taken 160 years into about 2 months by screening up to 1 trillion possible molecules. The goal is to find one compound that can do the work of a whole cocktail, which is the kind of sentence that makes pharma both excited and sweaty. He also points to a 19-year-old researcher who used AI to tear through huge biology databases in 2 weeks and find evidence for where cells may store the information about their youthful state. That's the fun part of this moment. A tiny lab with good tools can suddenly punch way above its weight. The not fun part is that the same tools could help people build pathogens, weapons, or other nightmares way faster too. Sinclair's bigger prediction is that eventually you won't be able to tell someone's age by looking at them. People could look 30 and have decades and decades of experience, which would scramble everything from careers to marriage to retirement. He talks about this like aviation. The debate isn't whether healthy lifespan can move, it's how far. And yes, he's willing to imagine people living for centuries with multiple careers, multiple families, and lives that stop fitting our current timeline at all. That sounds fascinating, right up until you imagine dating apps in a world where everybody is technically 146 and somehow still emotionally unavailable. He even says limb regeneration may be realistic in a few decades, pointing to mice regrowing injured fingertips and salamanders being absolute overachievers. For all the moonshot stuff, the most useful part is still boring and true. Sinclair says 5 basics could add roughly 15 years. Don't smoke, don't drink heavily, sleep well, exercise, and keep strong relationships. That last one matters more than people want to hear, because it's less sexy than supplements and a lot harder than buying a cold plunge. He also pushes back on simplistic Blue Zones mythology, saying some legendary longevity hotspots were boosted by bad records or outright fraud. And centenarians are often weird exceptions anyway, so building your whole health plan around one old guy who smoked and lived to 102 is not a strategy. On exercise, the message is refreshingly sane. If you're sedentary or overweight, start with walking and modest strength training, not some heroic injury montage. The diet section is classic longevity content because nobody agrees and everybody thinks they're being reasonable. Sinclair leans mostly plant-based, based on animal and longevity research, while Rogan argues meat is more nutrient-dense and says a meat-heavy diet plus fermented vegetables made hunger easier to manage. What's more interesting is Sinclair's framing that the body benefits from 2 different states. Abundance helps growth and muscle repair, while adversity like fasting, exercise, and calorie restriction kicks on survival and longevity pathways. He links fasting to cleanup processes that remove damaged proteins, which is why people stay obsessed with it, even when they are also very obviously hungry. They also talk about ketones and GLP-1 drugs as momentum tools. Sinclair says a GLP-1 helped him fast long enough to realize he actually could do it, but he's clear these drugs aren't harmless, and there may be rare eye complications, with correlation still not proving causation. One of the strongest points in the whole conversation is that relationships are not just emotional decoration on top of health. Sinclair says social connection may be one of the biggest longevity interventions, even citing research suggesting a reliable, loving partner predicts survival better than markers like blood pressure or cholesterol. Conflict, breakups, abuse, and a miserable boss can all crank up stress biology and accelerate aging. Supportive relationships do the opposite by giving people resilience, accountability, and a reason to keep going. And when they get into AI companions, the take is surprisingly grounded. A robot that always validates you might feel nice, but real people matter partly because they disagree with you and force you to see your own nonsense. The last piece is governance, and Sinclair is blunt that the system moves too slowly. He argues that clinical trials and approvals can eat up close to a decade, while about 150,000 people die each day from aging-related causes. His ideal version is a lot more parallel testing, faster movement for promising AI-generated molecules, and still keeping real safety controls. He also says the US is unusually willing to fund risky biotech, to the point that the government even blocked a big foreign investment in one of his companies over fears age reversal tech could feed into super soldier applications. That is a sentence from the present day somehow. He also says funding cuts hit his Harvard-related research and pushed him toward donations and public-facing projects, which gets at the broader complaint that longevity science could save massive healthcare costs later, but still struggles for resources now. So that's the state of the age reversal dream. Part breakthrough, part bottleneck, part full-blown sci-fi with paperwork. Thanks for hanging with Cortado Joe. If we all look 28 forever, I'd still like credit for getting here early. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.